You and I have been on a tear as of late, specifically driving EVs. The pace of introductions of just electric vehicles, it's unlike any other segment I've seen in doing this for the past 13 years. Well, over the past 3 years where this pace has increased, there was one car that came out that in fact was crowned World Car of the year before I joined the jury. You and I never drove it. Well, it's been updated, so I'd say it's high time we perhaps give it a try. Okay, so before you and I get too far down the road, let's understand what hasn't changed. Dual motor EV, 197 horsepower and 256 pound-feet of torque from each motor. Total system output is 394 horsepower and 512 pound-feet of torque. Then we need to get to the business of this being an EV, and that is the battery, 90 kilowatt hours. That hasn't changed. However, the onboard charger, that has changed. It goes from 7 kilowatts to 11 kilowatts, so it does change the charging time. There it arrives to 80% in a leisurely 40 minutes. The US EPA, they call the total range 254 miles. Then the performance figures, 0 to 60, somewhat surprising, 4.3 seconds. VMAX, not interesting, 128 miles an hour. I always get excited about cars you and I have never driven before, even those that have a battery, which are most likely very heavy. 4,951 pounds, or depending on express your weights and measures, 2,245 kilograms. With that dynamic mode. Oh, that gets up and goes, but notice the front end doesn't, wow, ever pick up. Like, I feel like I'm in a lowrider and I've got somehow the bags in the front picking up the front of the car. That's very, very strange. I have not experienced that in a very long time in a vehicle, but this, it's quick. The wheelbase is 117.7 inches. That's close to like an X5. So I wouldn't think with this kind of horsepower we talked about in the hangar, you'd actually get this kind of acceleration, but call me surprised. It's an unusually good acceleration experience. Now, all of that aside, I will provide one caveat. I'd like to see a bit more control over the squat of the vehicle under hard acceleration. Okay, now that we have pulling power and pushing power out of the way, being this is all-wheel drive, let's focus on driving dynamics. And here, it's not really a discussion about driving dynamics. It's a discussion about the personality or the flavor in which the way this thing drives. And over the past, I'd say 2.5 years, you and I have been introduced to a lot of crossovers and cars that are electric from normal OEMs, not the startups of the world. And this is an unusual instance. It's closer to that of like the Ioniq 5 and the Porsche Taycan, as well as the Mercedes-Benz EQS, in that it has a personality. The Taycan is a Porsche first, then an electric car. The EQS is a luxury car first, then an electric car. And the Ioniq 5 is unusual. It's a Hyundai, but it drives like a luxury car. This, it actually has the personality of a European kind of like touring crossover, meaning there's some heft to the way it goes down the road. There's some control over some of the planes of motion. In the back, it's a mess, but I don't expect it to be something like an AMG or even an SVR. Now, there is something we do need to talk about, and that would be the brakes. 13.8-inch diameter rotors in the front, 12.8-inch diameter rotors in the rear. That's the only area where the personality of this kind of runs out. The brakes, there's not enough stopping power for that much acceleration. Like, for example, let's do a panic stop here, and this, it's just, I feel like, wow, we need way more stopping power. It's either an oversight or maybe the brake pedal is not tuned the right way. It's not totally an on-off switch like other EVs, but it has no feedback, and frankly, the brakes don't really provide the performance they should with this kind of power. While you and I are on the topic of what's underneath the vehicle, both front and rear is a multi-link suspension. Now that, I believe, is the reason why we're getting some composure here. For the avoidance of doubt, it's softly sprung in no matter what mode that it's in, but there is composure, something I did not expect from almost a 5,000-pound, sort of tall baby buggy. Another item that goes into somewhat of the surprise column is the steering. Here, there's moderate weight, there's moderate feedback. And it's direct, especially considering what this vehicle, the mission of it, the steering is probably better than expected. Something that other EVs could use to copy. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game on the options game with today's contestant, a car we completely skipped over. But this one updated, the 2022 Jaguar I-Pace EV400 HSE for a base price of $69,900. Now, I do need to point out, there used to be different trim levels in the I-Pace world. Now, there is not, at least in the US. It is only the HSE, which was the fancy model previously. You would think that's a bad thing, but from what I understand, the price is actually lower than it used to be for the same fancy model. So this one really doesn't have any factory options, with the exception of the paint, Aruba metallic. It's kind of like a gold, silver, it's not attractive. This looks better in like red, like primary colors that have really high contrast and make it pop. So I would not pay the $1,550 for it. The Sierra tan on the inside with like a two-tone black on the dash and the doors, that, very nice. That we don't have to pay for. The rest of the options here are really accessories. Like, for example, the premium interior protection package. That is the heavy-duty floor mats, basically rubberized, $560. Then the basic rear convenience package. I believe that holds an iPad underneath the headrests. That is a whopping $240. Chrome wheel locks, $220. Then we press on to an accessory which is baffling to me. The panoramic roof sunshade package. These are sunshades you have to manually install into the vehicle. Think about this. You're driving down the road and you're like, oh my God, it's really hot. Let's close the sunshade. In most cars that are $70,000, you hit a button and the sunshade closes. This, you have to stop the car, get out, and put these nets with these like clips that hang the thing over your head. Now, the only way to describe this, and yes, I will admit this is odd coming from a Greek Orthodox Christian, this would be the automotive equivalent to a chuppah. And we pay $210 for it. Then we press on to the emergency pack, which I believe is a first aid kit, $65. Then the only other thing we add is the destination and handling von Graz Österreich for a British car, $1,150, which brings us to the total retail price of $73,895. I feel strongly that in every recent Jaguar episode you and I have done together, and there haven't been many, I've had to focus on the interior. And that's because the interior, they've done a significant upgrade in all of them. Remember, the XF was kind of the biggest difference. Some of that is here, specifically the tactile feel, some of the materials used in construction, specifically on the top of the door panels and the dash. It's unusually good. They've changed the UX here to match the XF as well as the F-Pace that we drove. It just doesn't have that iPad-esque screen. And thankfully they brought over the multi-use knobs that give you both the fan and temperature in one knob as opposed to having it cluttered with multiple knobs. Overall, I'm going to say it again, this is a reference that modern day manufacturers should look to as a good combination of big screens and real tactile feedback that is safe. Here they've got the right amount of knobs, they have dual functionality so they don't have all these different knobs, but they have the ones that you use mostly, like volume, thank you very much, or the fan speed, temperature over here, and then everything else is pretty much controlled through the steering wheel controls interact with the functionality in the screen here, or even in the head-up display. Okay, so let's cut right to it. I am shocked, and I think that should be the theme of this episode, because I didn't expect this to be very good. Now I can see why so many people buy these things, or have over the past couple of years until all these other new EVs came out. And I can see why my fellow World Car jurors crowned this World Car of the Year in 2019. But that brings us to the problem. It's no longer 2019, it's 2022, and the competition has absolutely leapfrogged this. This at just over 70 grand, a significant problem, because I could spend 10 grand more and get a two-wheel drive Porsche Taycan, or I can save myself 25 grand and I can get a car which I feel is better, the Hyundai Ioniq 5. That brings us to the wish list. And it's not about EVs, and it's not about this specific car. It's about Jaguar as a whole. You guys know that we have a Jaguar here at the studio. We love Jaguars, but they've lost their way. And perhaps the competition is putting them in a bad position because they're not going to have new product, from what I understand, until like 2025. It's 2022. That is too long, especially in the EV world, because ICE cars, they changed drastically every 5 to 7 years. EVs, the world changes in like 18 months. So let's you and I be abundantly clear with one another, shall we? That is 2 complete revolutions of the automotive world at its current pace until Jaguar introduces something substantially new. My fear, that is a bridge too long to cross to survival for a brand, even one this storied. Hoping I'm wrong, and this is the point of the episode where I turn this around to you to opine in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoManTV all word, MotoManTV all word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, a little bit behind the scenes, maybe you noticed it, Kumo and I, we felt nostalgic having a Jaguar back in the studio, even one that's electric. So much so, we decided to drag the XK150S, which was hiding in that corner over there, and we put it in the corner over here so you could see it peeking in different shots throughout the episode. Till I see you in the next episode, bis später.